My boyfriend James and I were both freshening up one morning in the bathroom when I first saw them. He leaned over the sink while brushing his teeth, and his shirtless, exposed back was dotted with a patch of pimples. They were raised, curly bumps that were a sickly shade of brownish yellow. It was strange that he was developing pimples. After all, at 25 years of age, James shouldn't have had trouble with them anymore. They were supposed to be a forgotten relic of puberty. I playfully tapped him on his back, and asked him if I could pop at least one. His reaction caught me off guard. I remember how he swiftly arched his back downwards, away from my touch, then looked at me with a deranged expression, before hissing the next words at me with bared teeth. "Don't touch them." That was the last time I'd ever bothered him with the issue. The way he'd aggressively told me off, hinted to me that the plague of pimples that adorned his back wasn't my issue and I needed to mind my own business. I assumed he was insecure about me seeing them, but he might have felt self-conscious, so I respected his wish. For the next month he constantly wore a shirt to the bathroom to hide the pimples. If he ever showered and got naked he locked the bathroom door, and didn't let me in. He'd stopped being intimate with me, and I assumed it was because he'd need to take off his clothes and shirt. His secretive behavior continued for about 3 more weeks. He tried hard to hide them, but I could still see the faint, rounded outlines of the pimples underneath his shirt. I could clearly detect from the increasingly bulging, swollen bumps that they had been growing over the weeks. I remember one night I'd woken up in bed and found James laying beside with his back to me. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to inspect the pimples. I tentatively peeled off his shirt and gazed at them. I know it might sound crazy to describe what I saw next. I'm not sure if I was just seeing things from being half asleep or the bedroom light being dim, but I swear I caught sight of the pimples faintly wriggling and moving around. Before I got a better look, James abruptly shifted sleeping positions and slept on his back. Over the next few days they continued to grow rapidly. Soon they were bulging quite conspicuously. James had started wearing heavy coats or jackets to work to hide them, though it was midsummer. I'd noticed something else too. Compared to last month, his face had become more gaunt and bony, cheeks hollow, limbs losing muscle mass. It's as if he was getting thinner, the more the pimples grew. I didn't know exactly what was happening to him, but it's as if those things on his back were eating him alive to grow. I know James asked me not to interfere, but I couldn't do nothing anymore, and watch his health deteriorate from those things. So one day I called the doctor and tried to book an appointment for the removal of his pimples. James must have overheard the conversation, because in the middle of the call he barged into the bedroom and grabbed at my phone before throwing it across the room, where it smashed into the wall and flew apart in hundreds of pieces. I was in cold shock, frozen in place as I stared at the spot where he threw it, before my eyes fluttered back to him when he started screaming at me. The words he hurled at me were so chaotic that I only remember snippets of what he said. It was something along the lines of me being a traitor who threatened to take away the one thing that was going to make him happy. I wondered if he was talking about me taking away the pimples, as if they were that precious to him. He said something else unsettling, and I remember every single word. "They are my babies, and I won't let you steal them away from me." I didn't even have time to digest what he meant by that statement before he was pushing me towards the living room door. He returned into the bedroom to get my handbag and he threw it at my feet. As he opened the front door that led outside his apartment door, I realized he was kicking me out. Before he did, he explained the reason was because I was apparently interfering in his private business, and that he'd invite me back in when he was ready. Then he shoved me out the door and locked it behind me. After minutes of banging on the door, shouting at him to let me back in without response, I gave up and simply walked away. That ordeal was 2 weeks ago. I'd booked myself into a cheap hotel, until I could arrange myself a better place to stay. I didn't see myself getting back together with James with the state he was in. I'd managed to buy myself a replacement phone that was relatively cheap. It performed basic functions like texting and calling. This all brings us to today. I received 2 messages from an unknown number. When I read the messages, I realized who they were from, though I wasn't sure how he'd gotten my new number. The first one read, "You can come back home now. The pimples are clear." The second, much worse one read, My babies have finally hatched from their eggs, and they want their mommy to come home. My babies have finally hatched, and they want their mommy to come home. I don't know how many times I reread that message, and each time it only sounded more alarming and disturbing. There was no way in hell I was returning to James. I wasn't an idiot. That message was far from a warm, welcoming invitation back home. I'd contemplated safer options of perhaps checking on him, like calling the cops to search his apartment. The issue was I didn't know what I'd even begin to tell them was the reason for my call. Maybe hi, could you please search my boyfriend's apartment because his pimples hatched and I'm worried whatever came from inside is going to eat me. I wondered if I should text him back, though I was so lost for words that I didn't know what I could begin to say to him. So I did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I felt paralyzed, a sitting duck holed up in my hotel room. Sometimes I would simply lie for hours on my bed, gazing at the ceiling. Other times I'd pace around the rooms to ease off the restless energy. Eventually I tried to keep my mind occupied by doing chores and cleaning each room. There was only so much I could do though before my hotel rooms were absolutely spotless. Still, I scrubbed and cleaned spots that were already gleaming in order to not run out of busy work. I even took a week's leave from work and told my boss I wasn't feeling well. It was somewhat true, I wasn't close to mentally ready to go back just yet. And I was half worried that James might visit my workplace and look for me there. I kept up this act of avoiding the situation for a week before I heard a knock at my hotel room door, and an eerily familiar voice accompanying it. James had come to me instead. I was at a loss of words. This shouldn't have been possible, at all. I never told James where I lived. I'd neither told any of my friends or acquaintances my new hotel address, so there was no conceivable way that he'd obtained it. James was bordering on, or most likely crossed the line of, being a stalker. He spoke across the wooden barrier of the door, and I stood on the other side to hear him, but I didn't dare open it. Hey, Katie. Listen, it's just. I didn't even allow him to finish before I cut him off to ask my pressing question. How did you find me? His next answer reached layers of crazy I can't describe. It was a bit difficult to track, you believe me. But they managed to use your scent. He paused, and in that space of time my face contorted in confusion. Scent. They? He continued before I could comprehend his words. They'll do anything to find their mother. I cringed so much at his sentence I felt my neck retract into my shoulders. James, explain to me who they is. If you let me inside you can meet them. So he brought them here, with him. My mouth stretched open in shock at the possibility. I will never let you or those things you brought inside here, I said through bared teeth. Okay, fine. If you won't let me in, then maybe just crack the door open a bit to see me. And make it easier for you to force your way in. No thanks, I bit back sarcastically. I want to extend a massive thank you to all our listeners for being part of our exciting episode. Your support is what makes this podcast possible, and we are thrilled to have you with us on this journey. If you enjoyed our adventure into the unknown today, please share this podcast with your fellow thrill seekers. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll dive into another captivating story full of mysteries and spine-tingling chills. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming stories. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your hearts brave, and your lights on. After all, you never know what's lurking in the shadows. This is your host, signing off. Stay safe and keep exploring the unexplored.